What makes a city powerful? Is it the height of its walls, the size of its army, or the king who makes his enemies afraid? In the story of ancient Babylon, the answer was different, because what made Babylon great was not only war. What kept its name alive for thousands of years was law, written law carved into stone. In the 18th century BC, Babylon was not yet the legendary name we remember today. It was one city among many in Mesopotamia. Around it, other powers were rising. City-states fought over land, rivers, trade routes, and control. It was a world where power could change quickly. One city could rise, another could fall, and in this dangerous world, a ruler named Hammurabi came to the throne. He was not just a king. Sitting behind palace walls, Hammurabi expanded Babylon's borders. He defeated his rivals. He turned a smaller city-state into one of the strongest centers in the region. But here is the important part. The reason Hammurabi is still remembered today is not mainly because of his army. It is because of his laws. Hammurabi understood something that many rulers before him had ignored. A kingdom cannot be ruled by the sword alone. A sword can take land. Fear can silence people for a while, but a growing city needs more than fear. It needs order, it needs rules, it needs people to know what happens when a promise is broken, when property is damaged, when money is owed, when families fight, when workers demand payment, and when the powerful try to take advantage of the weak. As Babylon grew, its problems grew with it. People borrowed money, land was bought and sold. Merchants carried goods from one place to another. Builders worked on homes and walls. Families argued over inheritance. Debtors struggled to repay what they owed. A person could damage another person's property. A worker could be cheated out of his wage. A trader could be deceived. In a society like this, justice could not depend only on the mood of the king. It could not depend only on the power of the richest families. The rules had to be visible. People had to know what was allowed, what was forbidden, and what punishment could follow. So Hammurabi had the laws written down. They were carved onto a tall black stone stele, and that stone was more than a monument. It was a message. The state was no longer speaking only through the voice of the king. It was speaking through written rules. For the ancient world, this was a major turning point. The Code of Hammurabi included hundreds of rules about family, property, trade, labor, debt, inheritance, damage, and punishment. It touched almost every part of daily life. What happens if a builder constructs a house and that house collapses? Who is responsible? What happens if a doctor treats a patient and the treatment goes wrong? What happens if someone steals another person's property? What happens when a debtor cannot repay what he owes? These were not modern questions. People were asking them thousands of years ago, and Babylon tried to answer them in writing. But there is something important to understand. Hammurabi's laws were not like modern law. They were harsh. The punishment was severe, and people were not treated equally. A wealthy free man, a common person, and a slave did not have the same status under the law. The same act could lead to different consequences, depending on who committed it and who suffered from it. So these laws were not fully just in the way we understand justice today, but historically, they were extremely important because power was being turned into something visible, something written, something that could be pointed to. The king's command was no longer hidden only inside the palace. It was carved into stone. Hammurabi did not present himself only as a conqueror. He presented himself as a ruler of order, a king who brought justice, a king who claimed to protect the weak from the strong. Of course, that was the ideal image. The reality was much harder. Babylon was still a world of inequality, fear, and brutal punishment. But the idea itself mattered because it showed that the power of a state does not live only in its army. It can also live in its laws. And this was part of Babylon's strength. Great cities do not survive only because of walls. They survive because people trust the system. Enough to live inside it, a merchant needs to know that his agreement has meaning. A family needs to know that inheritance follows a rule. A debtor needs to know what will happen. If he fails to pay, a worker needs to know that his labor has value. When everything changes according to the will of the strongest person, there is no stable state. There is only chaos. In Hammurabi's time, Babylon tried to bring order to that chaos, and that order helped turn it from a military power into a governed center of civilization. Maybe that is why Hammurabi's name did not disappear. The empire he built eventually faded. Its armies vanished. Its palaces were buried beneath the earth, but the laws, carved into black stone, remained. That stone stood as an answer to one of the oldest questions in civilization. Can people be ruled by fear? Yes, for a time. But if a civilization wants to last, it needs law. Hammurabi did not give Babylon only land. He gave power, a form, a shape, a voice on stone, in words, through rules. And sometimes what keeps an empire alive in history is not the battles it won. It is the laws it left behind.